Hey, greetings fanboys and fangirls. Jared here with another video review from Fanboys Forever. I want to start out by wishing you a very happy new year, and I really do hope that you enjoyed the holidays with your family just like I did. Of course, I didn't have a video for quite a while there as the holidays came up, and of course, I was enjoying time with my family. Unfortunately, my mother, she fell during this time and actually broke her hip. So we've actually been visiting her in rehabilitation and things. So it was a very unexpected Christmas, a little more eventful than we thought it would be in that way. But hey, we were blessed to still have her, and she's finally starting to recover a little bit better than she had been. So of course, any thoughts and prayers for her would be appreciated. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what we're looking at today. This was a highly anticipated release for me. This was from the new Operation Monster Force line. If you're curious about this line, this is the line from Big Bad Workshop, which is kind of a partnership or a group that Big Bad has established that kind of allows them to fund or at least partner with different companies on projects. For this particular line, they have partnered with the independent action figure company Fresh Monkey Fiction. And those guys are responsible for quite a few great 3 3/4 lines. And of course, they've been breaking into the 6-inch space. This is kind of like a cross between classic monsters and G.I. Joe. But what makes this one unique is it wasn't exactly created by Fresh Monkey Fiction. Instead, they actually partnered with a different independent action figure company to do this one, and this is the Maestro Union. Now, some of you all may already be familiar with some of their figures that they've done, including the Veteran William. Now, Veteran William is kind of like a giant werewolf figure, and this guy is sort of like a reversioning or a repaint of some different versions of Veteran William. He's almost like a super version that comes with all the different accessories that the different variations had, but just in a unique paint scheme to look more military. As we can see, we have the Operation Monster Force logo. We have it on the side showing Big Bad Workshop, and that this is figure number 10. This guy is called the Kiloworg. He is the Night Hunter. Now, this is kind of an army builder, as you'll see by the comic on the back. If you're interested in reading the comic, of course, this is a great time to pause and do so. But basically, this guy who looks like Dr. Quest, Benton Quest from Johnny Quest, and that figure is coming out and is obviously supposed to look like Benton Quest. But basically, they create this army of werewolves to assist the Forgotten King, who is the villain of the line, and they're going to be fighting Dracula and his army, the Delta Reds, who are actually the heroes of this line. So it's really interesting. At the bottom, we have a little warning and a little sticker that shows you this is an authentic Maestro Union product. All right, so you actually can't tell a lot about the figure from the outside of the box because it has all this plastic over it. So let's go ahead and remedy that right now. So we do have this little note right here, and there's also some Asian characters on there. It says toys are relatively tight when they leave the factory, especially at the joints. Avoid violent mechanical rotation as it may cause joint breakage. When you need to disassemble or replace accessories, especially in cold weather and low temperatures, you should first use a hairdryer to blow them soft before operation to avoid damaging the toy. So, of course, this is always a good tip for any action figure collector to always be careful with your stuff. So here's a bonus I didn't really expect. When you first pull this guy out of the box, you actually get this poster. And it's this big promotional poster right here that's folded up. It says Operation Monster Force, Big Bad Toy Store. The Forgotten King has returned, Maestro Union. And you can see the variations that you can do for the Kiloworg, since he is an army builder. However, if you have the money to army build a guy this expensive, then, you certainly don't need my review to help figure out whether you should buy this guy or not. You can just go ahead and buy him. And here is a better look at Kiloworg, where now that we have that plastic film off, we can kind of have a better idea of what it actually comes with. All right, and here we have him out of the packaging, the Kiloworg. The only things that I really had to do to get him set up for the review from his just regular packaged form was I had to install this wrist blade right here, and that was very simple. I just had to pop off the hand and slide it on and then put the hand back, and then I added these shotgun shells to the belt down there. Other than that, this is just him right out of the package. It's really important when you're talking about a figure like this, especially one that's so atypical as this. I don't have any figure in my collection quite like it. He's not, something that I'm familiar with at all. So it's very important that I talk about just the overall feel of this figure. And I have to say, it is just an excellent feeling figure to handle. And that is extremely important to me when I make a purchase like this, especially a figure that, let's go ahead and get it out of the way, is pretty expensive. I believe he's $84.99, something like that on Big Bad Toy Store, and I've had him on pre-order for quite a while. And, you know, I think the thing that I'm always worried about when I get something, especially, you know, from an independent company or something like that, is it going to feel miserable to handle? Am I going to be with a hair dryer, like it said on the instruction thing, or hot water? Am I going to have to like boil all the joints? I've had to do this before with, like, say, some NECA releases. It's a lot better these days, but used to, that was something that was just a ritual that I had to do, and I hated it. And I can honestly say none of that happened, even though they did cover themselves with a little warning thing that they included. No, I was able to just carefully, you know, move the joints like I would any other time when I'm first opening a figure. And there was no special handling that I had to undergo to make sure that this figure was, you know, in tip-top shape and ready to roll. So this was really, really great. And the feel of the figure, it's so weighty. You can tell there's just a massive amount of plastic here. It doesn't feel like creaky as you move the joints. It's all just really solid. Nothing is loose. It's really pleasant to handle. It has tons of articulation. There is a little bit of a learning curve. It's not huge or anything about learning how to distribute his weight as he stands. Of course, the way that his legs are made, you know, like that of a dog or, you know, a wolf in this case, it's going to be different than your regular human figure that you're posing. But once you get the hang of it, you know, it works well, it balances well. You know, you can get tripped up a little bit when you're trying to do, I guess, some more dynamic poses, but we'll get into all of that as we go. Well, there is a whole lot to talk about with this guy, so I believe we'd best get to it. Let's go ahead and let's just start with general sculpting, which is usually where I like to start with these kinds of figures. So for those of you that have watched a Fanboys Forever review before, you know how I roll when it comes to figures that have multiple heads. This guy does have 2 other heads, but I'll get into those during other sections of the review where I switch the head and keep it on. It's a lot better than just doing it at the end and saying, oh yeah, here's some other heads. That way you get a better look at everything. But for now, let's talk about the sculpting on the main head here. This is the one that he comes packed with, and I think this is awfully impressive. It's obvious why they decided at Fresh Monkey Fiction to say, hey, we should probably just call Maestro Union and talk to those guys and see if they would be willing to repurpose their veteran figure for this, because it is truly astounding looking. I mean, these guys really know their way around sculpting a werewolf, and this guy is awesome looking. He's much less Lon Chaney Jr. and much more Rick Baker from American Werewolf in London. So I definitely love what they did here. I love the piercing kind of orangey eyes that they have, and it's hard to get my focus to capture because his head, you know, is so differently shaped, but you can just see the love and attention and the detail with the fur, the dry brushing that's been added, the teeth, how they're kind of brown looking, probably a separate piece that's been shoved into that. Not only that, but you can also see that there's kind of a mane of hair that's actually made out of a soft rubber that's attached behind the face. So I actually think that's an awesome touch, and you can see that I can move it independently of this little kind of barrier piece right here. It also has the added bonus of making everything look more natural and like there's fur kind of flaring out and making it look less, I don't know, action figure-y and more like a wolf. You can also see here that with the muscle on the chest, it's really like the super ripped comic book kind of physique. And I love the dry brushing that they've done here because all that detail could be lost very easily, but they've actually added it. You can see his navel right there. He has like a 6,000 pack, we're gonna say. This guy's been working out, he's ripped. Not only that, but the coat itself, which is my preferred look, I think. I've not seen the other stuff yet, but from the pictures I've looked at, I really like this coat because, I mean, how could you deny it? It's an absolutely lovely sculpt. I see a lot of trench coats in the action figure world, but this one, man, there's just something not just about the sculpt, but also about the paint, and it really makes a very appealing colorway. I couldn't imagine this being colored in a more pleasing looking color. Around the collar here, you can actually see where it's worn and things. And there's also some appropriate wear right there at the top of the shoulder. There's actually been thought put into which parts of the coat would have the most wear, because this is the parts that are the most exposed to the elements right here at the tops. So I think that that wasn't left to chance, and they did a fantastic job on that, actually thoughtful weathering that they've applied. You can see that the detail on the arms here this is all, of course, from Veteran William, the Maestro Union figure, but the paint work here is completely unique for this release. And so you can see the awesome fur. These are slightly sharp on the end, not enough to cut me necessarily, and it is made out of kind of a rubbery piece, but that's the whole reason why on the box it says 17 and up, so that they don't have to comply with, the safety standards for the littler kids. Of course, we don't want anything to hurt them, but as adult collectors, we should just be careful. Same thing for these great pointy ears up here. They're pretty sharp, and the teeth are fairly sharp. So it's a good thing that they didn't have to conform to those safety standards, because that wouldn't have been possible. Down here, we have kind of a camo variation of the Veteran Williams pants. They're kind of like a Hulk type of thing, where he's busted out of those in his transformation. I really like these. Of course, there's alternate legs we'll talk about later, because you can make this guy buck naked, and we'll look at that later on. Down here we see his awesome feet, kind of dog, kind of wolf feet, and I really like the tail. You can see that it's done in all of these sections. Sometimes it's not the best illusion in the world when you break it up this much, but it does allow you to rotate it in a bunch of different ways, and each one kind of has a slight ball joint to it. It's not a huge amount, so I'm not sure if they needed to separate it this much. I think they would have been just as well off to have one ball joint up here and one down here, because they feel like the only ones that can actually turn. The other ones are more rotations. So I don't necessarily see the point in segmenting it that much, but I do like what you're able to do with it, and it's not that much of a deal breaker or anything. You can see it is on a ball joint right there, so if you don't want him to have the tail as a part of the werewolf transformation, he certainly doesn't have to. But I like that because it helps make him even more wolf-like to me and makes him more bestial. So, you have to love having him be a little more gnarly like that. The bottoms of the feet actually have awesome pads like a real wolf or a dog would have. So that is terrific looking, actually. And then from the top down, you can see it has wonderful detail in the toenails. And I forgot to mention, he does have these awesome dog tags around his neck, which hang really well and aren't stiff at all and are pretty rubbery, so they hang naturally underneath that fur piece around the neck, so it's really nice. Also, I really like the claw weapon that he has on his wrist. It's totally removable, but I like it. It probably isn't supposed to come together that much, and probably is something I could put in some hot water and then throw some cold over it and separate those out, but just so you know, that's how it came on mine. So let's go ahead and pop off the head, because we're going to be looking at the first variation that you can use and switch out. So you can see it just pops off right there. It's on a very small ball joint, actually, which I was not expecting. I thought it would be a little larger. It does make me a little nervous. You can also see that here you can take off the neck frill part if you don't want him to be so hairy, I guess. But I like it there, so that's going to remain for me. All right, and finally, here he is with an alternate head. And this is the first alternate head we'll look at of the other two. And this is the one where he's got kind of a cigar or something that he's smoking. It's kind of bent a little bit, and I think it looks really cool. It has a lot of personality. It's really fun. But this brings me to the first negative that I can talk about with the figure. It took me absolutely forever to get the head switched, because I didn't want to have to go and run and boil water and everything, or grab a hair dryer like the instructions said. I was trying to just make it work. Plus, I like to switch out my figures' heads on dioramas, and for me, I don't think that sounds very appealing, always having to do that to switch it out. So what I did was I just took a regular pair of scissors, and I just went in and grinded out just a little bit of the interior port for these alternate heads, and it's made them a lot easier to switch in and out. They're still extremely difficult to switch out, but they were practically impossible, pushing as hard as I could. So just so you know, it is not easy to get these heads switched, and you may be looking at a similar solution. Also, probably some shock lubricant oil might be a good idea to put in there. So yeah, but I really like the look of this. Of course, this is him with the other body. This is him with the trench coat look and all that. So let's go ahead and switch him out for a new look. In order to do that, what you'll want to do is just remove these arms, and they're just simply on ball joints on the inside. this one is in there a little bit better than the other one is. And you can just see it pops out and looks like that. And same for the other side. So from here, with no arms on the body, you'll just want to put his next costume accessory on, which is this vest. Now, here's where you have some options. If you want, you can envision this vest as something that has sleeves, so it's like a short sleeved kind of shirt. And that means you can go with a look that's similar to this. And to me, that makes plenty of visual sense. But you also get alternate shoulders, like this. So if you want them to have bare arms, you can in this look. In which case, you would actually disconnect this at the elbow. And that means now that you're left with this, and you can just plug it in and marry the parts. So this is what that looks like over here if you want it to have that look, and here's what it looks like over here with that look. I really think both of them look pretty awesome, to be honest with you. So I'm not really sure. I think it's just pretty much up to you. I do kind of like the bare arms. It's kind of tough looking, but I do feel like this is a little bulky compared to this shoulder, and that proportionally it makes a little more sense to have the sleeves. Something I tend to do in some of my reviews is be a little too long-winded about things. So for this section, we're just going to talk about accessories as fast as we possibly can. One of the things he comes with is this excellent kind of Gatling gun, minigun, whatever you want to call it. It's truly terrific looking. I love the paint treatment that they have on the barrel here. You can spin it. I wish that these had been empty so that you could add effects parts, but that's the only negative I have to talk about. You can see where there's bullets all the way around, and you can plug in this ammo like for an ammo belt. And this part led me to my first little quality hiccup, and that's the handle for the gun. Now it looks broken, but it's really not necessarily broken. Basically, this is just glued in, but I don't think that connection was ever going to hold as well as they thought it would. So this was plugged in and glued in at the factory, and it can still hold just fine when you plug it back in. So it's just something to be aware of. At least I don't think it's supposed to come undone like that. So it's just something you need to be aware of. I might have to reinforce that a little with some more glue. And that does create kind of a problem for me now. It doesn't really hold that well as I thought it would. So yeah, I will have to probably add some glue to that for sure. And in no time, your Kiloworg soldier will be mowing down Delta Reds with ease with this thing. So I really think that that's a terrific look. He certainly possesses enough articulation to where you can get him to aim it frontwards, and that's not a problem. The wrists are flexible enough to do what you need them to do. Like I said, the only problem is that handle right there, and I think he really does look terrific with it. If I want to, I can even bring it around more, which is usually a problem, you know, with a minigun. And you can see with a little bit of maneuvering, he can bring it even more forwards. So I think that it looks really cool, and this is a great way to display your figure. Of course, the one problem is it makes him a little front heavy, so you can see I have him lean back ever so slightly, and it still works really well. And you can get some really dramatic shots this way and kind of play with the focus in your action figure photography, so I think this is really fun. As for other accessories that he comes with, he includes quite an assortment of hands, like these open ones right here. A pair of hands that are slightly less open and more grasping, like has his claws out. Some trigger finger hands that he doesn't necessarily need for these particular weapons because there really aren't triggers per se. I guess you could use the trigger hand over here if you wanted to grasp that part, but this is just a handle over here. Beyond that, he has the claw attachment for the wrist. And interestingly, and we'll use these here in a minute, aside from the trench coat right here that we've already shown, he comes with these butterfly joint covers that aren't green to match the coat because he's about to get buck naked. He also comes with a bandolier of ammo to put around the chest, which we'll look at soon, and another version of the ammo belt that gets fed into the minigun. And of course, you have enough ammo belt here to have some fun with it. So if you wanted to, you could totally wrap this around and do all kinds of things. I don't have a lot of time to make it look good, but I think you get the idea. You can put this around his arm. You could wrap it around all sorts of different ways. But, you know, I think we've all sort of had different figures where we played with that notion before. So it's a really cool thing, no matter how you do it. And we actually have one more accessory, and that's this fur collar for the neck. So to achieve this next look, you pretty much have to disassemble the entire figure, which is actually a lot simpler than it sounds because everything are on little ball joints. And basically you're kind of getting rid of the torn pants right here, and you get this extra piece that you can use, this midsection, to get his werewolf butt right here, and you're kind of ready to just add everything to it. So the first thing you want to do is pop the chest in there with a little bit of pressure. And I'm glad that they do have the pressure in there, because it means that it's going to stay and not just pop back out. But yeah, okay, that's easier than the head was anyway, so I won't have to modify it. And of course, you'll have to do things like assemble the legs. And of course, once you've popped them off at the elbows, then you have these. But don't forget, we have those little butterfly shoulder joints right there that are gray to match the naked body. Basically, you just pop those in so that when these flex, you'll be able to see that gray plastic and it won't look so bare. And of course, we have the tail right here. Don't forget it. The unfortunate procedure that we have to do to get this thing popped in. Poor Kiloworg. So interestingly, the deal with this is that we can use it to bulk up the figure even more, especially when he's in this kind of naked mode. First, I'll just show you what it looks like without that. And so when you don't have the big fur piece on, this is what he looks like. And I think this is terrific looking. Now, what's interesting here is this review is kind of a 2-for-1, because you can just get this version of the figure a little bit cheaper on Big Bad Toy Store. It doesn't have any of the alternate costume accessories. He's just, you know, a naked werewolf figure. So if you want to round out your ranks, it's a little bit cheaper to army build like that. And that kind of solves the thing I was joking about earlier about not having the money to army build these guys. I'm also using an alternate head here, and this is the final one. And this is the kind of, you know, mouth open, kind of more feral head. And I think that it's terrific as well. And this is how the head looks when you have the trench coat on. So I think that looks really awesome. Might be the one I go with. So like I said, you can switch out for this kind of furrier version of the collar, but still utilize this piece as well, I think, because it kind of completes and leaves no gaps that way. And that leads to that kind of furrier, slightly more feral version of the buck-naked werewolf here, the Kiloworg. And I really like it as well. I don't necessarily see a huge difference in the two looks in terms of quality. I think that's just more of a preference thing if you want your Kiloworg to kind of have that, you know, longer hair, or if you want it to have the shorter hair. I don't know. For me, maybe I would probably go with a shorter hair just because it's more comic booky. But definitely if you were army building these guys and getting these kind of more naked variations of the figure for cheaper on Big Bad, you would probably mix it up every now and then. Another way that you can mix it up is to use this bandolier piece. And this kind of just helps the Kiloworg look a little less bare and a little more interesting, I think. So I think that this is also a really good option if you just want to use the bandolier bullets kind of strap right there. I think that looks really cool. We'll certainly do a quick look at articulation. You can see that the head has a lot of good range. There's no hinges, but the ball joint works really well. And that's even with this collar. The other thing is the shoulders. You can see they go up and down and they go around, not even hardly blocked by the furry collar. You can twist them up there below the shoulder. They do have a single joint at the elbow, but it's really good. You can see it comes to about a 90-degree angle there. You can twist the wrists right around there, and it also has a rotation right there at the elbow as well. All right, so the diaphragm actually has a really generous joint right there, and you can see that I can kind of go around with it and twist. So that works really, really well. Not only that, but we also have a little bit more motion right down there at the lower diaphragm joint at the waist. So you can use them both in conjunction to get some really, really deep stuff. Not only that, but of course you can go left or right. So with the legs down here, believe it or not, there is actually sort of a drop down hip. It's very slight, but it's just enough to get those expanded kicks like this. So you can get some really, really tall high kicks like that if you want to. You can rotate it a little at the ball joint. There's a rotation there at the knee. Of course, it is single jointed. You can bring it down, but it's an excellent single joint and nothing really hinders it. So you can see it goes pretty deep, a little over 90. You can rotate it, of course, and then we have a hinge right there at the kind of upper shin. And it can rotate, of course. We have a hinge at the ankle, and you get that ankle rocker pivot. Now back here at the tail, you have a ball joint at the base of it, And then you have all these rotations and some ball joints at the tops and bottoms of that tail. You can actually see where it's stressed a little bit, so that concerns me just a little. I may have to kind of heat that up or kind of put a little oil in there to make sure that that's well lubricated. But yeah, he's extremely well articulated. You can do a whole lot with him. And even though it is kind of a balancing act sometimes to get the legs to work the right way, especially if he's holding the giant minigun, but you can get those wide stances. In terms of height, we'll go ahead and look at Declan Van Helsing, the kind of hero figure for the line. And you can see that there is a notable height difference between these guys. Of course, this is a 6-inch scaled line, and that puts the Kiloworg here at roughly right at about 8 inches or so. Maybe 8.5. So he's a really big figure, and I think he looks terrific. And you can see that he works really well with even a 7-inch scaled figure like Batman. And that's the great thing about these oversized kind of figures. And that's with his knees bent, but honestly, that's kind of the way this guy has to be. If you straighten out the legs too much, it doesn't even look like a dog / a werewolf anymore. Here's one of his comrades from the Forgotten King, the Sleepwalkers, and I think they look really good together as well. And here he is against one of his mortal enemies, the Delta Reds, and 2 army builders caught on different sides of the conflict. Whoa. And you can see he is, you know, a little hard to manage sometimes, but you can just straighten him out like that, and it's usually not a problem. All right, so to wrap things up with the Kiloworg here, this is an extremely impressive release, and it's something that you really never see happen for mainstream kind of big companies where they team up on a mainline release. Yet it's created by a whole other company. And I just think that that's an incredible thing. We see crossover lines, but we never really see a company saying, you know what, you guys have got this, you know, you all know what you're doing with whatever, and you guys come in and do it for us. But I think that's one of the really special things when you're dealing with, you know, an independent kind of action figure group like these guys. And I think that they've done a really cool thing here. I really do enjoy the Kiloworg. I think that he's an awesome figure. I think that there's so much about him that just turns out really perfectly. I think the look that they've achieved here is really special. It's a great example of how you can utilize existing tooling to create something that's new, yet it really works well with what's already established here in the line. You know, one of the coolest things, I guess the big thing when it comes to kind of negatives or something that may cause you to hesitate a little is that sticker shock. This guy is $84.99, and you know that is kind of a hefty price tag, but there's a couple of things to consider. For one, this is very much independent action figure companies working together on this. For another, this is definitely a smaller run product, so there's definitely some considerations with that large price tag. But then again, you also have to consider where the industry is at, especially if you look at companies like Maestro, whose figures do feature soft goods tailoring, which of course adds a lot of expense to the figures. And those figures, you know, are $100 plus these days. So when you look at the scale of something like the Kiloworg here, it really isn't all that unreasonable to expect that sort of price tag. Of course, if you don't really care that much about the army fatigues like the ripped pants or the overcoat, then you can of course go with that slightly cheaper version on Big Bad Toy Store, which is just the kind of naked werewolf with the customization options that he includes. So there's definitely some options there. As a matter of fact, during the course of production on this video, I happened to check, and it looked like that this version right here was, for at least the time being, sold out on Big Bad Toy Store. Hopefully that will change, and they'll continue to get more stock in, and hopefully this guy isn't super limited. But I ended up being very well satisfied with this guy. And even though there's a couple of hiccups, like having to take that pair of scissors to expand the neck ports on some of those alternate heads, that's an easily remedied thing, and I think most people who collect figures are kind of used to dealing with that sort of thing. Other than that, just having the handle kind of come out prematurely out of the top of the minigun, and just being able to glue that back in, which I did, and ever since then it's fit in perfectly. So other than that, though, I really have nothing to complain about. So of course, now it's your turn. Let me know down below in the comments, have you bought any of these Monster Force figures? These are awfully impressive, and I'm really curious to hear from any of my viewers that have bought into these guys like I have, and I'm curious to hear what you think. I would also really appreciate it if you would give the video a like and of course subscribe to the channel. We're always talking about different action figure lines here, and I really enjoy reading your comments. So please leave one down below and I'd be happy to respond. And of course, a Happy New Year to you all, and God bless you and yours. And I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out.